I just missed we're on the record. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the first quarter meeting of the New York State Fire Prevention and Building Code Council. It's 2023, and we're all back for more fun this year. I'll start by saying that I appreciate all of you and your willingness to serve. We have a very, very, very busy meeting. We have a very, 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 very busy year. I think I added one very there. And so I want to start with that. I want to next thank the staff. I usually do that at the end, but I think it's actually appropriate to do it at the beginning. They had a very quick turnaround. I'm using very a lot today. To get you a lot of information, and I know it came relatively late. We were shooting for 2 weeks ago. I think we got it to you about a week ago. But it was a very decent amount of work to get this far, and they have a lot more ahead of them. I guess I don't want to continue to talk. Let's see if we can move this meeting along and do it in a relatively short manner today. Turning over to Kevin. Kevin, you want to call the roll, please?
Matt Tebow.
I'm here.
James Cable.
Here.
Michael Weber.
Here.
Vincent Rappaciulo.
Here.
Keith Wen.
Here.
Michael Spano. Joseph DeStefano.
Here.
Claudia Bramer.
Here.
Joseph Toomey.
Here.
Sean Hamlin.
Here.
Timothy DeRuscher.
Here.
Robert Hughes.
Here.
William Tyne.
Here.
Dominic Marinelli.
Here.
Patrick Dolan.
Okay, so into Public Officers Law, Section 103A, a quorum is established. Kevin, I believe everybody is in person at one of the three locations, right? All right. So we are set to go today. I'm going to ask New York City and Buffalo to keep their mics muted as much as possible, just because there's a lot of feedback today. If you wish to speak, obviously unmute and wave, and hopefully I'll see you. The video setup here in Albany is a little different than normal, so feel free to jump on top of me and say you need to speak if you want to speak. I'll finish up with anybody wishing to address the Code Council. We have a public comment period. It's agenda item 8. If you're on the WebEx, please let China Clark or Kevin Dewar Clark know via the chat function. If you're in the room, maybe step up and tell Chad, and we'll accommodate you at the end. We already have 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 on the list, so it's going to be a busy public comment period today. Okay, Kevin, are there any agenda changes for today?
Yep, so we have 2 agenda changes. The town of East Hampton has requested to be removed from the agenda. And then additionally, I'd like to move the town of Henrietta up in the order for agenda item 4 to be heard first.
Okay, so under agenda item 4, the town of Henrietta moves to the first slot, and the town of East Hampton drops off. Great, thank you, Kevin. All right, that concludes. Kevin, anything else on agenda 1 before we move to 2? Okay. Moving to draft minutes for our meeting in December 9th, 2022. You should have received it in your packets. Are there any proposed changes?
I would note that the address of the Buffalo location for December is listed as 65 Court Street. It was our old address. We're at 295 Main Street now. Room 802, I believe.
Great catch, Bill. Thanks very much for that. We'll amend on the fly and make it part of the motion. Are there any other changes? Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Sure, Keith.
On the minutes, there was a discussion about the ability to discuss any subject matters among ourselves, or we have to do it independently. And I just want to verify the wording is correct. It says something about the public meeting law, and something about the members can meet do you mean to say cannot meet individually or as a group without you calling for the executive meeting?
The members can meet under that law as long as they don't constitute a quorum.
Okay, so that's what that means. Okay,
That's what that means.
that's fine, thank you.
All right, so the only change would still be the one that was suggested by Bill. Okay. Can I have a motion to? Oh, you're making the motion. Okay. Joe's making a motion to adopt the minutes as amended by Bill. Is there a second?
Second.
Claudia seconds the motion. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, the minutes of. What?
Sean would have abstained because he
Oh.
wasn't here last time.
So Sean abstains because he wasn't here last time. Okay, that's noted for the record. So the minutes of December 9th meeting are adopted as discussed. Agenda item number 3. Chapter 18 of the laws of 2023. We have a notice of adoption for the hot tubs and spas rulemaking. Okay.
So as you may recall, back on November 23rd of 2022, the bill was signed by the governor as Chapter 651 of the laws of 2022, along with approval memo number 33. And that law amends paragraph C of subdivision 14 of section 378 of the executive law to provide that a hot tub or spa with a safety cover which complies with ASTM F1346 2003 or any similar standard which may be approved by the Code Council, or swimming pool with an automatic power safety cover which complies with ASTM F1436 2003 or any similar standard which may be approved by the Code Council shall be exempt from the provisions of this subdivision. Based on the governor's approval memo number 33, an agreement was secured with the legislature to clarify that the intent was only to exempt hot tubs and spas with safety covers from both the pool alarm and barrier requirements of subdivision 14, and that swimming pools with automatic power safety covers would still only be exempt from the pool alarm requirements. On March 3rd, 2023, Bill A625 S 1347 was signed by the governor as Chapter 18 of the laws of 2023. The law further amends paragraph C of subdivision 14 of section 378 of the executive law as indicated in the approval memo. The law also makes a technical amendment to re-letter the second paragraph C as paragraph D, which relates to temporary swimming pools. So now we won't have 2 Cs anymore. The rule text attached to the notice of proposed rule was drafted in accordance with the approval memo and the resulting chapter amendment that just passed earlier this month.
Okay, you took what I was going to say. Well, I gave you time to switch screens, but okay. I can ad lib. Are there any questions about this?
Yep, the only thing that I'd add is public comment period ended on March 27th. We received no public comments. We made one minor editorial change by removing an extraneous S from one of the one word. So the packet that you're seeing now is substantially the same as the packet you've already seen before.
Okay. All right, hearing no questions or comments or debate, I'll move. We have 2 motions here, right? Okay, so we have to do the seeker motion first. As we normally do, I'll make the motion, but we'll have Penny to read it because we'd like it to be nice and exact in the record. Go ahead, please and thank you.
For your consideration, I move 1, that the Code Council find and determine that the adoption of the rule identified in Agenda Item 3, Chapter 18 of the Laws of 2023, Notice of Adoption, Hot Tubs and Spas, will not have a significant environmental impact and will not have a significant adverse effect on any significant fish or wildlife habitat, scenic resource, or statewide significance, important agricultural land, or area included in an approved local waterfront revitalization program. And 2, that Kevin Dewar-Clark PE be authorized to sign and deliver on behalf of the Code Council and the Department of State A, the State Environmental Quality Review Act Short Environmental Assessment Form, indicating that no or small impact may occur in response to each question in Part 2 of the form, and determining in Part 3 of the form that the proposed action will not result in any significant adverse environmental impacts. B, the New York State Department of State Coastal Management Program Coastal Assessment Form. And C, the certification of no significant coastal impact. So moved.
Thanks, Peniota. So again, I'm making that motion. Do I have a second for that motion?
Second.
Bill Tyne seconds the motion. Is there any discussion on the motion? And hearing none, Kevin, if you'll please call the roll.
Matt Tebow,
I vote yes.
James Cable,
Yes.
Michael Weber,
Yes.
Vincent Rappucciulo,
Yes.
Keith Wen,
Yes.
Joseph DeStefano,
Yes.
Claudia Bramer,
Yes.
Joseph Toomey,
Yes.
Sean Hamlin,
Yes.
Timothy DeRusher,
Yes.
Robert Hughes,
Yes.
William Tyne,
Yes.
Dominic Marinelli.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously. Okay, on to the second motion and the operative one. And again, I'll make it with Peniota reading it. Go ahead.
For your consideration, I move, 1, that the Code Council find and determine that adoption of the rule identified in Agenda Item 3, Chapter 18 of the Laws of 2023, Notice of Adoption, Hot Tubs and Spas, and the amendments to the Uniform Code to be made by that rule, effective on the date of publication of the Notice of Adoption of this rule in the State Register, rather than 90 days after publication of the Notice of Adoption of this rule, as authorized by Executive Law Section 378, 19A2, is appropriate because the changes to the Uniform Code will not impose any additional compliance requirements on any person for the following reasons. A, Chapter 651 of the Laws of 2022 and Chapter 18 of the Laws of 2023 provide that the amendments to Subdivision 14 Executive Law Section 378 shall be effective on November 23rd, 2022. B, currently the Uniform Code requires permanent barriers to be installed around all swimming pools, hot tubs, and spas. However, the new legislation allows for an exception to these permanent barrier requirements for hot tubs and spas which are equipped with a safety cover meeting ASTM F1346-2003 or any similar standard approved by the Code Council. C, this rule would amend the Uniform Code to include provisions addressing Subdivision 14 of Executive Law Section 378 as amended and effective November 23rd, 2022 to allow for the aforementioned exceptions. D, developing, proposing, adopting, and implementing such a rule to become effective at least 90 days after the date on which notice of such change has been published in the State Register would delay the effective date of the rule and be inconsistent with the mandate provided in Chapter 651 of the Laws of 2022 and Chapter 18 of the Laws of 2023. And F, a rule amending the Uniform Code to add these new exceptions will not impose any additional compliance requirements, but allow for an alternative to compliance with the existing permanent barrier requirements of the Uniform Code for hot tubs and spas, which are equipped with a safety cover meeting ASTM F1346-2003 or any similar standard approved by the Code Council. 3, that the rule identified in Agenda Item 3, Chapter 18 of the Laws of 2023, Notice of Adoption, Hot Tubs and Spas, be adopted as a permanent rule. And 4, that the rule and the amendments to the Uniform Code made by the rule shall be effective on the date the notice of the adoption is published in the State Register. So moved.
Again, I'm making that motion. May I have a second, please?
Second.
Okay, I actually saw Robert Hughes first, so we'll say he seconds that motion. Thanks, Robert. Just real quick, before I ask about any questions, I'll ask one. The operative date, what's the likely publication date? 2 weeks from
If I file it
today?
before Tuesday,
Yep.
it would be April 19th.
Great, thank you. Is there any other questions or discussion? Hearing none, seeing none. Kevin, call the roll, please.
Matt Tebow,
Yes.
James Cable,
Yes.
Michael Weber,
Yes.
Vincent Rappucciulo,
Yes.
Keith Wen,
Yes.
Joseph DeStefano,
Yes.
Claudia Bramer,
Yes.
Joseph Toomey,
Yes.
Sean Hamlin,
Yes.
Timothy DeRusher,
Yes.
Robert Hughes,
Yes.
William Tyne,
Yes.
Dominic Marinelli.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously, and That dispenses with agenda item 3. Okay, we're moving right along to agenda item 4. Here's where we slow down a little bit. More restrictive energy code filings, Energy Code 11109. We're going to start today with a quick presentation from Chris Scroy of NYSERDA. Chris, I believe you're unmuted.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak today. Again, my name is Chris Scroy, and I'm a senior project manager on NYSERDA's Codes, Products, and Standards team. So NYSERDA is aware of multiple municipalities adopting New York stretch and severing additional provisions beyond the mechanical ventilation or ERV, HRV provisions that the Code Council is familiar with in New York Stretch 2020. NYSERDA, although NYSERDA published cost effectiveness analysis relative to state energy code baseline for both the residential and commercial New York Stretch 2020, the authority does not intend to perform formal supplemental analysis for local governments that adopt New York Stretch 2020 with specific provisions severed. However, because NYSERDA, because New York Stretch is produced or published as an above code supplement, it remains that the net result of a local government's removal of any one or more provisions of New York Stretch from its local energy code results in a local energy code that is more restrictive than the 2020 Energy Conservation Construction Code of New York State. This is because the removal of any one or more provisions of New York Stretch from a local energy code will result in a return baseline provisions of the state energy code, and the remaining balance of the provisions still included from New York Stretch local energy code are more restrictive than state energy code. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Do any of the members have any questions for Chris? Oh, we have him on the line. Okay. Hearing none, I'm going to turn it over to Emma, who's not in the room today, because we made room for Penny Oda. So, Emma, why don't you take us through the three that we have today to dispense with. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Matt. Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Thank you. The division continues to receive new filings for more restrictive local energy codes on behalf of the Code Council. First on the agenda today is the town of Henrietta, who filed local law number 2 of 2023, adopting New York Stretch 2020 version 1 and severing several specific provisions, including the mechanical ventilation provision of section R403.6.2. And the local law was filed less than 30 days from adoption, which makes it enforceable. NYSERDA's stringency analysis and the statements just made by Chris Croy to the council have indicated that even with those provisions severed, New York Stretch is still more restrictive than the state energy code. Based on this, the division recommends that the local energy code adopted by the town of Henrietta be found to be more restrictive than the state energy code. Matt.
Thanks, Emma. Do we have any questions for Emma on the town of Henrietta? Okay. All right, hearing none, Penny Oda is going to read a motion that I will put on the record. Go ahead.
For your consideration, on February 8th, 2023, the town of Henrietta, the town, adopted local law number 2 of 2023, which amended the town of Henrietta code, the town code, to adopt New York Stretch Energy Code 2020 as a supplement to the state energy code with exceptions. The local law was filed with the Department of State Records Unit pursuant to the Municipal Home Rule Law on February 13th, 2023. On February 10th, 2023, less than 30 days after the adoption of local law number 2 of 2023, the town filed a copy of local law number 2 of 2023 with the Department of State for the Code Council's review pursuant to subdivision 2 of section 11109 of the Energy Law. On July 10th, 2020, and September 16th, 2021, NYSERD presented to the Code Council a report indicating that New York Stretch Energy Code 2020 version 1.0, which modifies certain provisions of the 2018 International Energy Conservation Code and ASHRAE Standard 90.1 2016, is more restrictive than the currently effective version of the State Energy Code. On December 3rd, 2021, NYSERDA presented to the Code Council a report indicating New York Stretch Energy Code 2020 version 1.0, with section 403.6.2 removed, is still more restrictive than the currently effective version of the State Energy Code. Today, on March 31st, 2023, NYSERDA presented to the Code Council a report indicating New York Stretch Energy Code 2020 version 1.0, with any one or more provisions of New York Stretch removed, is still more restrictive than the currently effective version of the State Energy Code. The Town of Henrietta's Local Energy Conservation Construction Code, as amended by Local Law Number 2 of 2023, adopts New York Stretch by providing that the State Energy Code shall be modified in the manner contemplated by New York Stretch, except for the following: modifications made by New York Stretch to Chapter 6, reference standards relating to Manual D16, residential duct systems, by Part 3.17 of New York Stretch. Section C405.10 added to the 2018 IECC by Part 1.26 of New York Stretch. Section C405.11 added to the 2018 IECC by Part 1.27 of New York Stretch. Section R403.3.8 added to 2018 ICC by Part 3.7 of New York Stretch. Section R403.6.2 added to the 2018 IECC by Part 3.11 of New York Stretch. Section R404.2 added to the 2018 IECC by Part 3.14 of New York Stretch. Section 10.4.7 added to ASHRAE 90.1 2016 by Part 2.16 of New York Stretch. And Section 10.4.8 added to ASHRAE 90.1 2016 by Part 2.17 of New York Stretch. I move that the Code Council determine, pursuant to Subdivision 2 of Section 11109 of the Energy Law, that the Town of Henrietta's Local Energy Conservation Construction Code, as amended by Local Law Number 2 of 2023, is more restrictive than the currently effective version of the State Energy Code. The Code Council makes no finding or determination regarding any provision in the Town of Henrietta's Local Energy Code that may be a local standard for construction within the meaning of Section 379 of the Executive Law, and nothing herein shall be construed as the Code Council's approval or adoption of any such local standard for construction. So moved.
Thank you for reading that very thorough motion. I appreciate it. May I have a second for that motion? Joe Toomey seconds the motion. Is there any discussion on the motion? All right, hearing none. Kevin, if you will please.
Matt Tebow,
I vote yes.
James Cable,
Yes.
Michael Weber,
Yes.
Vincent Rappuccillo,
Yes.
Keith Wen,
Yes.
Joseph DeStefano,
Yes.
Claudia Bramer,
Yes.
Joseph Toomey,
Yes.
Sean Hamlin,
Yes.
Timothy DeRusher,
Yes.
Robert Hughes,
Yes.
William Tyne,
Yes.
Dominic Marinelli.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously. Kevin, if you'll let the Town of Henrietta know. All right, moving to the Town of Ithaca, Local Law Number 1 of 2023. Emma, do you have anything to add there?
Thank you. The local energy codes for the city and the town of Ithaca share many commonalities, and I will present them together, but Matt will have separate motions capturing the particulars of each filing for your consideration. Both the city and the town of Ithaca adopted nearly identical versions of the Ithaca Energy Code supplement, which is not based on New York Stretch. This is a different local energy code. They filed their local energy conservation codes with the Division of Building Standards and Codes on behalf of the Code Council in May and June of 2021, respectively. The supplement contained provisions that were effective in the near term and also contained provisions to be effective at future dates of January 2023 and January of 2026. The Council found the near-term provisions to be more restrictive than the State Energy Code at the meeting of September of 2022. Earlier this year, the city of Ithaca adopted a resolution and the town of Ithaca adopted a local law that make editorial clarifications to the energy code supplement that increase the number of points required for compliance under the path termed the easy path, and also modify the manner in which points are accrued under the same path. As before, the construction and design provisions of the Energy Code Supplement adopted by the City and Town of Ithaca apply in addition to the requirements of the State Energy Code, thus making it more restrictive than the State Energy Code. The division recommends that the Code Council find the amended local energy conservation construction codes for both the city and the town of Ithaca to be more restrictive than the State Energy Code. Back to you, Matt.
Thanks, Emma. Does anyone have any questions on this one for Emma? All right, hearing and seeing none. Oh, this is, yes. Okay. We're doing the town, right?
Town first?
Yes. So you want to read the motion for the town?
Sure. So this is with respect to the town of Ithaca. At the September 23rd, 2022 meeting of the Code Council determined that the town of Ithaca's local energy conservation construction code as amended by local law number 5 of 2021 and local law number 8 of 2022, including the town of Ithaca Code Chapter 144 Energy Code Supplement, adopted 2021-06-14, amended 2022-04-25, was more restrictive than the currently effective version of the State Energy Code. On January 9th, 2023, the town of Ithaca adopted local law number 1 of 2023, which amended Chapter 144, entitled Energy Code Supplement, to the town of Ithaca Code, the town code. Local law number 1 of 2023 was filed with the Department of State's State Records Unit on February 23rd, 2023, pursuant to the Municipal Home Rule Law. On January 30th, 2023, less than 30 days after the adoption of local law number 1 of 2023, the town filed a copy of local law number 1 of 2023 with the Department of State for the Code Council's review pursuant to subdivision 2 of section 11-109 of the Energy Law. The town of Ithaca's local energy conservation construction code, as added and amended by local law number 1 of 2023, requires all buildings, structures, or premises to be designed to comply with the State Energy Code and the town of Ithaca Code Chapter 144 Energy Code Supplement, adopted 2021-06-14, amended 2022-04-25, 2023-01-09. The Energy Code Supplement includes provisions that are more stringent than the State Energy Code. I move that the Code Council determine pursuant to subdivision 2 of section 11-109 of the Energy Law that the town of Ithaca's local energy conservation construction code, as added and amended by local law number 1 of 2023, is more restrictive than the currently effective version of the State Energy Code, provided that the town's local energy conservation construction code is at all times interpreted and enforced by the town's zoning board of appeals and by the town's code enforcement officer in accordance with the following conditions. 1, variances granted under town code section 144-602 are limited to the energy code supplement, and no variance granted under town code section 144-602 can vary or modify any provision or requirement of the state energy code. 2, in chapter 144 of the town code and chapter 125, entitled Building Construction and Fire Prevention of the Town Code, the term ECC-NYS means the State Energy Conservation Construction Code in its entirety, and not only the publication entitled Energy Conservation Construction Code of New York State. 3, notwithstanding the manner in which the terms commercial building and residential building are defined in Chapter 144 of the Town Code, for the purposes of applying the State Energy Conservation Construction Code, the term commercial building and residential building shall have the meanings described in the State Energy Conservation Construction Code. Commercial buildings as defined in the State Energy Construction Code shall be subject to the State Energy Conservation Construction Code provisions applicable to commercial buildings, and residential buildings as defined in the State Energy Conservation Construction Code shall be subject to the State Energy Conservation Construction Code provisions applicable to residential buildings. And 4, the National Electric Code in effect at the time of the application for a building or electrical permit shall be interpreted to mean the version of the National Electric Code as incorporated by reference in the State Energy Code. The Code Council makes no finding or determination regarding any provision in the Town of Ithaca's Local Energy Conservation Construction Code that may be a local standard for construction within the meaning of Section 379 of the Executive Law, and nothing herein shall be construed as the Code Council's approval or adoption of any such local standard for construction. So moved.
Thank you, Paniota. Give you a second to have a glass of water there. Can I have a second for that motion? Looks like Mayor DiStefano seconds the motion. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, seeing none. Kevin, if you'll please.
Matt Tebow,
Yes.
James Cable,
Yes.
Michael Weber,
Yes.
Vincent Rappaciulo,
Yes.
Keith Wen,
Yes.
Joseph DiStefano,
Yes.
Claudia Bramer,
Yes.
Joseph Toomey,
Yes.
Sean Hamlin,
Yes.
Timothy DeRusher,
Yes.
Robert Hughes,
Yes.
William Tyne,
Yes.
Dominic Marinelli.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously. Kevin, if you'll let the town of Ithaca know of the council's decision. Moving to the city of Ithaca, I'll just ask one more time, does anyone have any questions on that one? Rema? All right, hearing none, we jump right to the next one. Go ahead, Paniota.
For the City of Ithaca. At the September 23rd, 2022 meeting of the Code Council, the Code Council determined that the Local Energy Conservation Construction Code of the City of Ithaca, the city, as amended by ordinance number 2021-02, including the Ithaca Energy Code Supplement, revised 7/13/2022, was more restrictive than the currently effective version of the State Energy Code. On February 1st, 2023, the city adopted Resolution 6.3A to approve amendments to the Ithaca Energy Code Supplement. On February 14th, 2023, less than 30 days after the adoption of Resolution 6.3A, the city filed a copy of Resolution 6.3A and the Ithaca Energy Code Supplement revised 2/1/2023 with the Department of State for the Code Council's review pursuant to Subdivision 2 of Section 11109 of the Energy Law. The City of Ithaca's Local Energy Conservation Construction Code, as amended by Resolution 6.3A, requires all buildings, structures, or premises to be designed to comply with the State Energy Code and the Ithaca Energy Code Supplement revised 2/1/2023. The Ithaca Energy Code Supplement includes provisions that are more stringent than the State Energy Code. I move that the Code Council determine pursuant to Subdivision 2 of Section 11109 of the Energy Law that the City of Ithaca's Local Energy Conservation Construction Code, as amended by Resolution 6.3A, is more restrictive than the currently effective version of the State Energy Code, provided that the city's Local Energy Conservation Construction Code is at all times interpreted and enforced by the city's Director of Planning, and by the city's Building Code Board of Appeals in accordance with the following conditions. 1. Unreasonable hardship exemptions granted under City Code Section 146-55 are limited to the Ithaca Energy Code Supplement, and no unreasonable hardship exemption granted under City Code Section 146-55 can vary or modify any provision or requirement of the State Energy Code. 2, notwithstanding the manner in which the terms commercial building and residential building are defined in the Ithaca Energy Code Supplement, for the purposes of applying the State Energy Conservation Construction Code, the terms commercial building and residential building shall have the meanings described in the State Energy Conservation Construction Code. Commercial buildings, as defined in the State Energy Conservation Construction Code, shall be subject to the State Energy Conservation Construction Code provisions applicable to commercial buildings, and residential buildings, as defined in the State Energy Conservation Construction Code, shall be subject to the State Energy Conservation Construction Code provisions applicable to residential buildings. And 3, the National Electric Code in effect at the time of the application for a building or electrical permit shall be interpreted to mean the version of the National Electric Code as incorporated by reference in the State Energy Code. This determination is limited to the Ithaca Energy Code Supplement revised 2/1/2023, and the Code Council makes no finding or determination regarding any subsequent amendments or revisions to the Ithaca Energy Code Supplement. In the event the City of Ithaca would like to amend the city's Local Energy Conservation Construction Code to include future amendments or revisions to the Ithaca Energy Code Supplement revised 2/1/2023, then such amendments or revisions would need to be filed with the Code Council in accordance with Subdivision 2 of Section 11109 of the Energy Law. The Code Council makes no finding or determination regarding any provision in the City of Ithaca's local energy code that may be a local standard for construction within the meaning of Section 379 of the Executive Law, and nothing herein shall be construed as a Code Council's approval or adoption of such local standard for construction. So moved.
Thank you, Benny. May I have a second for that motion? Robert Hughes seconds the motion. Is there any discussion on the motion? All right. Kevin, if you please.
Matt Tebow,
Yes.
James Cable,
Yes.
Michael Weber,
Yes.
Vincent Rappaciulo,
Yes.
Keith Wen,
Yes.
Joseph DeStefano,
Yes.
Claudia Bramer,
Yes.
Joseph Toomey,
Yes.
Sean Hamlin,
Yes.
Timothy DeRusher,
Yes.
Robert Hughes,
Yes.
William Tyne,
Yes.
Dominic Marinelli.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously. Kevin, if you'll transmit that to the City of Ithaca, please. All right, we are done with agenda item 4, moving to agenda item 5, more restrictive local standards for construction under Executive Law Section 379. I believe we have one today. It's the Town of Farmington. It's local law number 7 of 2022, and I'm asking Jeannie Rice to present today, Code Council. Jeannie,
Okay, can you hear me?
we can.
Okay, good. All right, so the town of Farmington, New York in Ontario County submitted a petition for an MRLS based on local law number 7 of 2022, which was passed on November 22nd, 2022. The town provided their petition to the division on December 14th, 2022, which was within the required 30 days. Local law number 7 replaces in its entirety Chapter 74 of the town law, which generally appears to be the town's updated code enforcement program. The petition specified that only sections 74-4D and E are more restrictive than the Uniform Code, and as such, only these sections are included in the MRLS petition. In total, between sections D and E, there are 11 subparts which each address different provisions or exceptions to said provisions. Section 74-4D specifies several fire protection requirements in 6 subparts which were analyzed individually by division staff. Section 74-4D1 requires all new buildings to have a, quote, NFPA compliant fire suppression sprinkler system, end quote, but does not specify what NFPA standard is to be used, nor what edition of the NFPA standard should be used. Additionally, the local law does not specify that sprinkler systems must be automatic. While requiring all new buildings to install sprinkler systems appears to be more restrictive, the Uniform Code requires automatic sprinkler systems in many different building types and occupancies, and depending on occupancy and building factors, requires conformance with one of 3 NFPA standards, NFPA 13, 13R, and 13D, all 2016 editions. As such, the local law is less restrictive than the Uniform Code. Section 74-4D2 specifies signage location, minimum text height, and colors for fire department connections. While the minimum text height required by the local law is greater than that required by the Uniform Code, the local law does not require the signage to include the purpose of the fire department connection beyond identifying the presence and location of the fire department connection. Conversely, the Uniform Code requires fire department connections to be labeled with information such as, quote, automatic sprinklers or standpipes or test connection or a combination thereof as applicable, end quote, in addition to labeling the fire department connection location. Overall, this provision is less restrictive than the Uniform Code. Section 74-4D3 requires all new buildings to have a, quote, NFPA compliant addressable fire alarm system, end quote, but does not specify what NFPA standard is to be used or what edition of the NFPA standard should be used. While requiring all new buildings to have a fire alarm system appears more restrictive, the Uniform Code requires fire alarm systems in many buildings and requires that such systems comply with NFPA 72 2016 edition. As such, this provision is less restrictive than the Uniform Code. Section 74-4D4 duplicates the requirements for key boxes found in the Uniform Code without including more restrictive provisions. Section 74-4D5 requires that quote, all site security gates shall be equipped with a means of opening by fire department personnel, end quote, which is the same as the requirements of the Uniform Code. However, the local law does not include provisions requiring compliance with specific UL or ASTM standards, which is required by the Uniform Code, making this provision less restrictive. Section 74-4D6 requires buildings undergoing a repair or alteration which, quote, exceeds 25% of the square footage of that building, end quote, to have a, quote, approved fire suppression sprinkler system, end quote. Similar to the provisions of 74-4D1, this section does not specify that sprinkler systems must be automatic, nor does it specify what NFPA standard is to be used or what edition of said standard, making this provision less restrictive than the Uniform Code. Section 74-4E specifies exceptions to the fire protection requirements stated in Part D and is separated into 5 subparts which were analyzed individually by division staff. Section 74-4E1 exempts, quote, single-family dwellings, duplexes, and townhouses, as well as related accessory buildings, end quote, from the sprinkler requirements specified in Section 74-4D. In comparison, the Uniform Code requires automatic sprinkler systems to be installed in townhouses and 1- and 2-family dwellings, which have a height of 3 stories above grade plane, making this provision less restrictive. Section 74-4E2 exempts, quote, any farm-related structure used as part of an active agricultural operations as determined by Ag and Markets, end quote. This description is very broad and does not match the definition found in the Uniform Code. The exemption in the local law could be interpreted to include, for example, processing and packaging buildings, which are not considered to be agricultural buildings under the Uniform Code and may be required by the Uniform Code to have sprinklers and or fire alarm systems, making this provision less restrictive. Section 74-4E3 exempts, quote, accessory buildings having less than 6,000 square feet of total buildable area, provided further that such buildings, A, are not higher than 1 story, B, are located at least 100 feet from any other structure, and C, contain no fuel, gas, or heat sources. While most buildings which would fall under this exception are not required by the Uniform Code to have automatic sprinklers, this exception is very broad and could be interpreted to include, for example, a large wedding barn or mercantile building with high-piled storage, both of which would be required by the Uniform Code to have automatic sprinkler systems. As such, this provision is less restrictive than the Uniform Code. Section 74-4E4 states that, quote, such accessory buildings shall be identified by a building-mounted sign that reads non-sprinklered building, having contrasting lettering to the color of the building's exterior siding, and at least 4 inches in height and located near the main entrance to said building, end quote. While the local law is unclear as to which accessory buildings are subject to this provision, the Uniform Code does not require any such signage, making this provision more restrictive. Section 74-4E5 states that, quote, in spaces where the discharge of water would be hazardous or damaging to equipment or occupants, a fire suppression sprinkler system shall not be required to be installed. Such a determination shall be made in writing by the CEO or fire marshal, end quote. This provision of the local law could be interpreted as allowing variances to the provisions of the Uniform Code, thus making this provision less restrictive. The town's petition states that fast-growing population and new development have led to traffic delays on volunteer travel to fire stations, including increasing fire response times throughout the town. Additionally, the town states that the number of volunteer firefighters is decreasing, leading to staffing issues for fighting fires. The town states that requiring automatic sprinkler systems would mitigate the risks posed by increasing fire response times, thus reducing both loss of life and property damage. In conclusion, based on the information provided to the Code Council in the staff analysis, the division is recommending that the Code Council find and determine that the standards for construction imposed by sections 74-4D and E of the Town Code, as amended by the 2022 local law, are overall less restrictive than the Uniform Code and do not conform with accepted engineering and fire prevention practices and the purposes of Article 18 of the Executive Law. While no provisions are allowed to be less restrictive than the Uniform Code, to the extent that some provisions are found to be more restrictive standards, the Council must determine if such more restrictive standards are reasonably necessary because of the special conditions prevailing within the local government as identified by the town. Should the council find that noted recommendations from the division are correct, and/or the council finds that there are no special conditions prevailing in the town that make such standards reasonably necessary, then the council should deny the town's petition to approve or adopt such standards. And that's it.
Thanks, Jeannie. Okay, so just to remind the members of the standard, Jeannie just went through it, but I'll just run through it one more time, right? In order for us to approve a more restrictive local standard for construction, we have to find that it's more restrictive, obviously. We have to find that there are special conditions, and we have to find that it's in accordance with generally accepted engineering principles. Got that? Thank you. And that it meets the purposes of Article 18. Thanks, Penny. Okay, so we have a recommendation from staff that is, and she took us through it in painstaking detail, that is less restrictive in a number of places. I don't want to just sort of dispense with it at that. I think we probably do want to sort of work through the special conditions piece too a little bit, just because we don't want to send them away if we're going to deny it today and then have them come back with it in the correct place and more restrictive, and then deny it because they didn't have special conditions. So I think we want to kind of try and do both today, as a service to the public in the town. I am aware that the town has 2 representatives on the line or in the room. On the line. Mr. Del Priore and Mr. Werner. I'm sorry if I just butchered your names. They didn't give you the phonetic. So, gentlemen, if you'd like to speak and address the council, please feel free.
All right, so I'll start by unmuting Dan. I actually don't see the other name on here, so I'll unmute you, Dan, and if you have anything to say. All right, you should be unmuted.
Thank you. Can you hear us okay?
We can.
All right. I actually do have our Fire Marshal Gordner with me today. That's why we're only locked down by 1. And I also have our Director of Development for the town, Ron Brand, with us on this meeting. So yes, we agree with the staff findings about the less restrictive. It was never the intent of the town to write anything that was less restrictive, and we'd be willing to address those moving forward. So the special conditions is what we are really interested in hearing what the Code Council has to say. And in that regard, I know there was a small summary of lack of volunteers that we have. The other side of that is the had in the town, and we submitted information in regards to the growth and how fast the town is growing. We also mirrored our petition to you guys from our municipality next to us, the town of Victor, who submitted to you guys back in 2011 for the same conditions, and they were approved. And we are going now, as the growth has come to our municipality, we were trying to mirror what they had done, which seemed to help their situation. We feel fully that it would help our situation here in our municipality. The last part of this I wanted to bring to your attention is we do have 3 fire companies that have all come to the town looking for some help with the commercial businesses that are rapidly growing in our community. And they are really in support of sprinklers. We've had 3 major fires over the last few years, and all those buildings were total losses due to just the lack of volunteers at this time, slow response times. So they're looking for anything that they can do. They are actually trying to get more volunteers, looking at paid staff, but they're also saying that this would be a huge benefit for our community to have this kind of regulation in place.
Thanks, sir. I appreciate your comments today. Members, I mean, you've seen the motions already a little ahead of time, so you know that this is likely, and the town is agreeing that it is less restrictive in places, so it's going to be there. That's going to be the motion. But I think it's important to at least discuss the special conditions provisions, even though we probably will not reach it in a motion today. I'm just going to read from Jeannie's staff analysis just one more time. The town's petition states, that fast-growing population and new development have led to traffic delays on volunteer travel to fire stations, increasing fire response times throughout the town. Additionally, the town states that the number of volunteer firefighters is decreasing, leading to staffing issues for fighting fires. The town states that requiring automatic sprinkler systems would mitigate the risks posed by increased fire response times, reducing both loss of life and property damage. And you just heard from representatives of the town that it actually put some very good detail behind those sort of top-level statements. So I'm going to open it up. Mayor.
Wouldn't that criteria apply to almost every community? I know my own community, volunteer recruitment is very low. Surrounding communities, and we actually have a combined department. We find our paid department now is responding to surrounding townships on mutual aid calls because of lack of response. So I think we would be opening up a can of worms if we use that as a criteria for approving it.
Thank you, Mayor. Excellent points. Claudia?
I would agree with you. There's definitely volunteer fire problems, but in this particular application, they are talking about things that seem to be specific to them about the widening of the highways, cutting off the volunteers from being able to get to the other side of town in a timely fashion. And I think what I heard today was something I didn't catch in the summary, and maybe it's in the petition itself about an adjoining municipality has already been granted a similar exception. So I think this is actually going to be beneficial to have the two towns that are adjoining have similar provisions. But I would support the special conditions.
Was that in 2011? Is that the?
So the town of Victor resubmitted in 2011. Their initial submission was actually 1995 that they had submitted, and their special conditions were slightly similar but slightly different. They also cited the heavy expansion. They cited the lack of municipal water within their municipality, hydrant spacing about 12 miles in some cases, a limited storage tank height, didn't provide enough firefighting flow or pressure. And they also cited the development of Eastview Mall, which is a large mall in the town of Victor that had sprinkler systems that was successfully fighting fires in comparison to other commercial buildings in their municipalities that did not have sprinkler systems.
Could we get a copy of that submission? Do we understand the specifics of their submission?
Yeah, I think we had I talked to Dan earlier this week, and I pulled the 2011 one. I think we have to go to archives to maybe
It would be
find
helpful
95.
if they're utilizing that as a reference point. It's helpful for us who already may not have been on the board or have, I don't know, we'd like to have an understanding. The question I had is they referenced 3 specific fires. What was the cause of those fires?
So, Dan, I'm going to unmute you again if you have any information on the cause of the fires that you had cited.
I can't comment on one of them. They're still under investigation. Another one was a set fire, so arson. And then the third one, I believe, was cooking fire. But they ended up being total losses.
What was the third one? I didn't quite get that.
We didn't catch what the cause of the
third
third
was
fire.
a restaurant. I don't know all the details of it. But a smaller restaurant that has suppression. Also, I want to go back to the water source comment for the town of Victor. We are on the same water source. The town of Victor and the town of Farmington have the same conditions, water tower. So those conditions, I didn't write those in there, but those are good points.
The reason I just bring that up is I think it's important. Specifically, we reference a restaurant. Is there an issue? Was there an operational of a correct of the fire suppression system itself? Did something not function correctly? Was it not installed correctly? Did they discontinue it? That added to potential issue that caused this fire.
Those are good questions, and I would have to get that information for you guys.
Between Claudia and Robert, there's actually a really good point. The devil really is in the details in these circumstances, right? So data would help support the position, right? How long is it taking the fire company to get across town was the one I thought of when Claudia was talking. And Robert brings up, if we're gonna say that we had 3 total losses, well, why? And how would that be different than a surrounding community, especially when we have the Victor scenario right next door? Anyone else? Tim? My tongue's in.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, 2 comments here. I've been doing this since early 2000s. My vote on this specific item will be basically based on 2 points. Certainly, the town has indicated an intent for a more restrictive standard, that being providing fire protection sprinkler systems in various buildings above and beyond what the state code would require as a triggering threshold. With corrections, I don't think anything in that town law specifically says we're not going to go through and use, or we're not going to enforce provisions in the state fire prevention and building code. It's just merely the trigger point. So that's number 1. And number 2, we start talking about these special conditions. I think it's unconscionable that this board would have the ability or even a thought process to say that a local home rule, local leaders understand exactly what's going on in their region, and we can come up with any reason we want to say that it is not a special condition, and yet going back in time, specifically in this case, the town of Victor and many other jurisdictions, there were many jurisdictions with code or local laws that were more restrictive than the state construction code. If we continue down this path of denying local laws that are more restrictive than the state code, that effectively provides a mini maxi code in New York State, being the minimum standard, and therefore we're not going to permit or allow anything more restrictive. The intent historically has been to make those provisions consistent with the uniform code, and yet let local authorities that know better than what any other state or other kind of body would determine that those local conditions are necessary and good. For that, and the reasons for that, I will be, if this does come to a vote today, I do not agree with the staff analysis, and I would vote no, and certainly encourage the town of Farmington to continue on and to bring this back to the Code Council. And then I certainly wish that this council would start looking at special conditions as being viewed from the eyes of the locals, not from a position of someone else. Appreciate that time, and I think we need to keep that in mind going forward.
Thanks. Anybody else?
Bill Tynan, Buffalo.
Hi, Bill.
Hi, I'm going to respectfully disagree with Tim on that and say that I think it's very important that we have a uniform code, that the special conditions really need to be demonstrated before we depart from that uniformity. The intention of this has always been, particularly when New York State moved to join the ICC family of codes, to have a code that's the same across the country. It has provisions within it for geographic differences, but the intent is to keep it uniform, and our job is to keep it that way in the state of New York, unless there's some overriding reason to depart from that. That way, anyone who builds, there's not a separate building code in every community in the state of New York, where anyone moves over a municipal line, they have to figure out and read thousands of pages of code to figure out what they're supposed to do. It should be the same. And the idea, I certainly understand the desire of communities to be safe. We, in turn, adopt a new code every 3 years, taking a hard look at the code section. at reviewing all these codes before we adopt them. And the idea that communities come in here, I think it's important for communities like Farmington to understand where some of us are coming from in that regard about maintaining uniformity unless there's some overriding reason to depart from that. And coming in here and giving us anecdotal evidence to say we're unique because we're growing without statistical evidence to that fact, that we have longer response times with no times submitted to show us that these times are in fact increasing, or traffic studies to show us that the traffic is getting considerably worse. I couldn't do a development in a community without doing that to get through the secret process and do an environmental impact statement and demonstrate what my project does to the traffic network, to the water supply network, that all of these things are working together to say, I need to mitigate for what I'm building. And the community has some responsibility as well, and I assume that the town board or the planning board listen to the fire department when they approve projects. They should be paying attention to their development patterns, not building dendritic street patterns that have only one access in or out, requiring people to go from one land use to another and travel down trunks that are now being overtaxed at peak hours, that they pay attention to those details as they develop. And in fact, if they are growing, show us the evidence of that, that says that they're so unique compared to any other community in New York, and especially in upstate New York, the conditions have gotten so bad and so deleterious to the health and welfare of the residents of their community that they have to be different than every other place in New York State. So I'm sympathetic with the desires. I certainly want the residents of the state of New York to be safe, but I don't think we should have a different set of rules in every municipality in the state of New York. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. Sean, I saw you next.
Yes, I don't know if I can state it as eloquently as Bill just did, but I agree. One of the charges that I believe that when we adopted the international code was uniformity. And that uniformity, I think, protects all of New Yorkers, as well as from a design standpoint, how we develop our projects, not knowing, or every community having a different code. So I believe that, yes, there needs to be a very short, defined argument as to why they are different. That would separate from other communities.
Thanks, Sean. Anyone else?
I would just say I would completely agree with both comments and say that the details and facts very much matter when you're asking to be more restrictive, specific in a case of this nature.
Thanks, Robert. Anyone else? Back to Tim.
Question. So the only reason we're doing this specialty provision is that the executive law is different for construction requirements in New York versus the energy code, which does not have that same provision. Is that correct?
That's correct.
I couldn't hear.
That's correct.
That's
Thank you.
correct.
Thank you. Understand.
Tim's point is made. Claudia.
On the point of the motion that was made earlier about not agreeing with staff, I mean, I'm not a construction expert. I feel like I've got to, rely on the staff's expertise here about their points on the pieces that are not more restrictive. But I get that they're trying to be more restrictive. I think the intent clearly is there. So I'm glad that the town understands those. It sounds like their officials understand that, and to come back, if they're going to come back to the code council, they'll address those and what they've heard here today about the discussion about the special restriction, special conditions. They can perhaps bolster their application, their petition on that aspect.
Thanks, Claudia.
Right, so if we're saying no, or we're voting yes or no on the motion about the more restrictive, I guess I'll just say I'm relying on the staff's analysis there of the details.
Thanks, Claudia.
And I guess I can just say our analysis is similar to that we did for Elmsford. I think it was around this time last year. They had similar language that, again, I don't think the intent was there to be less restrictive. And then, we certainly would be able to help work with the town to address those concerns.
Just last, I would not hold against them any of the points that seem to be more restrictive. I think that's the details in the language. And I do believe their intent was to be more restrictive. I think it takes the expertise of your team to help sometimes an applicant understand that the details and the language from that point of view really matter. I think here the focus would absolutely be on the details and supporting information on the special condition.
Anyone else? Okay, hearing none, I hope the town got what they needed out of the discussion today. And I turn that back over to them, but now we'll move on to the motion, which Peniota will read. I will make. Go ahead, Peniota.
For your consideration, on or about November 22nd, 2022, the town of Farmington, the town, enacted local law number 7 of 2022, the local law, which amended chapter 74 to the code of the town of Farmington, town code, to include fire prevention requirements and exemptions in section 74-4D and E. The local law was filed with the Department of State Records Unit pursuant to the Municipal Home Rule Law on December 27, 2022. On or about December 14, 2022, less than 30 days after the local law was enacted, the town supervisor submitted a copy of the local law and petition relating to the local law to the Code Council pursuant to Executive Law Section 379. I move as follows. First, I move that the Code Council determine pursuant to Executive Law Section 379(1) that the standards imposed by Section 74-4D and E of the Town Code, as added by the local law, include provisions that are less stringent and less restrictive than the standards imposed by the Uniform Fire Prevention and Building Code. Uniform Code. Second, I move that the Code Council find pursuant to Executive Law Section 379(2) that to the extent that the standards for construction imposed by 74-4D and E of the Town Code, as added by the local law, include provisions that are less stringent and less restrictive than the standards imposed by the Uniform Code, the Code Council cannot find that such standards are reasonably necessary because of special conditions prevailing within the town. Third, I move that the Code Council find pursuant to Executive Law Section 379(2) that the standards for construction imposed by Section 74-4D and E of the Town Code, as added by the local law, include provisions that do not conform with the accepted engineering and fire prevention practices and the purposes of Article 18 of the Executive Law. And fourth, based on the foregoing determination and findings, I move that the Code Council deny the town's request that the Code Council adopt or approve the standards imposed by Section 74-4 of the Town Code, as added by the local law. So moved.
All right, thanks, Peniota. May I have a second to the motion? Nobody second the motion. Is there any discussion on the motion? Claudia?
Thank you. Is it implied that this would be without prejudice for them to resubmit
So,
as a revised?
so it is without prejudice in that they can make changes to their local law, basically resubmit
Okay.
and come back to us. And I was going to, after we voted, I was going to ask the staff to work with them to the extent that they want to work with staff on this. And I was going to suggest that perhaps they bolster with data their position on special conditions.
Okay. We don't need any language in the motion itself. Great. Thank you.
So,
Jim, again, some clarification just from my own position that no, based on the technical issues, the determination that it's less restrictive, but encourage them to resubmit to correct those technical issues and bolster the special conditions for our consideration, correct?
that is what
Thank you.
that's what I was going to direct staff.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. All right, hearing none. We've got the first and second, we've had the discussion. Kevin, please read the roll.
Matt Tebow,
Yes to deny.
James Cable,
Yes to deny.
Michael Weber,
Yes.
Vincent Rappaciullo,
Yes.
Keith Wen,
Yes.
Joseph DeStefano,
Yes.
Claudia Bramer,
Yes.
Joseph Toomey,
Yes.
Sean Hamlin,
Yes.
Timothy DeRusher,
No.
Robert Hughes,
Yes.
William Tyne,
Yes.
Dominic Marinelli.
Yes.
12 to 1. Okay. I won't repeat, but I will direct staff, please, and to the town. If you want our assistance, I'm directing staff to assist you to the extent that they can, and we'll ask you to bolster your special conditions when you come back, and we'll take it up as a fresh approach. Okay. That closes agenda item 6 and moves us to agenda item 7. Uniform Code and Energy Code.
Actually, we skipped 6. That closed 5, and we're moving to division update.
Thanks, Kevin. How do I do that?
Nice try.
I was trying to move us along. Kevin killed it, it's his fault. Wow, I moved my screen. Yes. All right, Mr. Adario, you are up for the division update. I'm gonna say that John had a little oral surgery, so let's hope he can get through it. If he doesn't, we'll bear with him. John, fire away.
Thank you. Good morning. Can you hear me?
We can. You sound good.
Okay. Okay, good. Yeah. So I just have a couple updates on regulations under the authority of the Secretary of State. First, Part 1208, which is the regulations for the minimum standards for code enforcement training. We filed a notice of proposed rulemaking. It was actually published in the February 1st edition of the State Register. The rulemaking documents and rulemaking dates are posted on our website. I believe the public hearing is on April 5th, and the rulemaking closes on April 10th. So this is, just as a reminder, this is the rule that amends Part 1208 to align with the changes to the executive law. It includes the training time frame for obtaining certification for both BSIs, building safety inspectors, and CEOs. It's changed to 6 months from appointment date for building safety inspectors and 12 months for CEOs. So currently at 18 months, and it'll be now 6 and 12. Enforcement activity was changed to be that building safety inspectors must complete 1/3 of the training to start to conduct fire safety and property maintenance inspections. And then CEOs must complete 2/3 of the certification training to perform CEO activity, and then 1/6 to perform building safety activity. So currently that provision is that they have to commence the training to start enforcing. So that will be changed once this rule goes into effect to comply with the executive law. The other change was to allow DOS to accept nationally recognized certification in lieu of the basic training. Just a clarification on that they still at that point, once the basic training was accepted, in lieu of that for the certification, they would still need to do the 24 hours annually. The other update was to Part 1205, which is the variances and appeals procedures. The notice of proposed rulemaking was published in just this week, the March 29th edition of the State Register. The rule documents and dates are posted on our website. The public hearing is May 31st, and that closes June 5th. So general changes to the clarifications in 1205, and also added some of the definitions. And then we also added the proposed process for alternative compliance cases to allow the use of design and construction provisions requirements of nationally recognized standards. And again, this was the item that came out of the recommendation from the Code Council work group. So that's all I have. So thank you.
Does anyone have questions for Mr. Dario? Tim?
I just have one. Thank you, Jen. The alternatives provision that was put in 1205, I know the work group had discussed referencing or incorporating by reference the ICC's performance code. And that 1205 language, I don't believe indicates that because it's very broad, because there could be other things. Is it the intent that we would also look at the performance code as part of this code update as an option? Or would that only be referenced and used in 1205 for quote variances?
Oh, at this point, it would only be used in 1205.
Okay, thank you.
Claudia?
Thank you for the update on the code enforcement training. Can you give us an update on whether there's any changes to the training schedule offered?
So for our basic training?
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, we've been doing them via webinar, which has allowed us to do them, do more of them and sooner. So code enforcement officials are getting certified much quicker. So right now, we don't foresee that time frame being an issue for someone that starts. I mean, obviously, if someone can't meet some of the training, then that may become, but there's always a avenue for a waiver. If for some reason they can't meet that time frame and there's good cause shown, they could apply for a waiver from that time frame. But I think right now, if somebody starts, they can get certified within that time frame. I think, does that answer your question?
Yeah, the webinars, having those be more accessible and more often is great. Thank you.
Anyone else for John? Okay, then the second half of this agenda item is Peniota. Peniota, you want to give a legislative update for us?
Sure. So on December 30th of 2022, a bill was signed by the governor as Chapter 831 of the laws of 2022, along with approval memo number 108. The law amends Section 375 of the executive law by adding a new subdivision 9 to authorize the Code Council to examine, evaluate, and make recommendations concerning the standardization of the Uniform Code and local building codes and permit processes for the purpose of protection against the effects of sea level rise, flooding, saltwater corrosion, coastal or riparian erosion, storms, and other degradation that may arise out of the characteristics of coastal environment or structures located wholly or partially in a FEMA designated special flood hazard area or moderate risk flood hazard area according to FEMA's current flood insurance rate maps. The law also amends Section 378 of the executive law by adding a new subdivision 2-A to provide that the Uniform Code shall address standards for the construction of all buildings and for the condition, occupancy, maintenance, conservation, rehabilitation, and renewal of certain existing building structures and premises located on or near coastlines for the purposes of safeguarding life and property therein and thereabout from the hazards of sea level rise, flooding, saltwater corrosion, coastal or riparian erosion, storms, and other degradation that may arise out of the characteristics of the coastal environment or structures located wholly or partially in a FEMA designated special hazard area or moderate risk flood hazard area according to FEMA's current flood insurance maps. But approval memo number 108 noted that the bill would authorize the Code Council to evaluate and make recommendations concerning whether the Uniform Code should be modified to include standards for the protection of buildings and structures located within coastal areas that may be susceptible to water-related damage, including climate risk, but noted that an agreement was secured with the legislature to make technical changes to the bill, including clarification to the applicability of the standards, the geographic areas to be studied, and the data to be relied upon. So on March 3rd, 2023, Bill S-828A, A626A, was signed by the governor as Chapter 19 of the laws of 2023. The law amends new subdivision 2A of Section 378 of the executive law by renumbering it as 1A and to provide that the Uniform Code shall address standards for the construction of all new buildings and for the construction or renovation of existing buildings that undergo a substantial improvement as defined by the council, located wholly or partially in an area designated on the applicable FEMA flood insurance rate map as a special flood hazard area or moderate risk flood hazard area. The law also clarified that the standard shall be based on available data from nationally recognized sources or data produced by state agencies based on nationally recognized procedures, analysis, and studies, predicting the likelihood of extreme weather events. So with respect to new buildings, the current Uniform Code already includes certain design flood elevation requirements such as freeboard. With respect to existing buildings, the current version of the Uniform Code also includes certain design flood elevation provisions that are applicable when there has been a substantial improvement. However, as part of the code update, the code development staff will consult with DEC with respect to whether the Uniform Code's flood mitigation requirements need to be further amended.
Thanks, Peniota. Does anyone have questions for Peniota on that? Okay. I don't know if we actually got them the bill language. We got them the analysis. I don't know if we got them the bill language.
I don't believe so, so
All
I
right,
can.
we will get this. We will get the members the bill language. Obviously, this stuff is happening in real time. So. All right. If there are no other questions, I'll just say what everybody probably knows, that the budget negotiations are still ongoing. So that's also out there right now. We'll see what comes of that. Okay, that closes agenda item 6. All right. Now we can move to agenda item 7, which is the Uniform Code and Energy Code updates. Kevin.
All right, so I'll go first. I'll just give a general timeline update of where we are and where we're hoping to go. I'll pass it to Emma for some updates with respect to Energy Code, and then I'll close again with Uniform Code. But as discussed in many other meetings, in order for the co-council to be at the forefront of building fire prevention and energy codes, we're moving towards adopting a code based on the 2024 International Code Council books and standards. So we're working closely with ICC and their available documents in order to produce something that will allow us to post a notice of rule and development that will incorporate the 21 changes, the 24 changes from the I-codes, and any existing and potential new statutory changes, with a target of that first NRD document being sometime in the fall of 2023. If we can stay on track for that, this will allow us to solicit comments from the public as well as being well positioned for when the 2024 ICC code books are actually finalized, and that'll allow us to move directly into the actual rulemaking process once those books are ready. So I just have here the next 7 co-council meetings, some of which we don't even have a date for yet, but I'll just give you the general month and what we are anticipating, at least the deliverable, to be at that point. So obviously you guys got a large packet of information, sitting here on the desk that you guys got on Monday. I apologize, we wanted to.
It's visual.
Yes. Try to provide a visual for everybody. Yep.
I knew you did.
So that was the initial deliverable that Emma and I will both dive into a little more detail on that in a minute. The next planned meeting for June would be to take what's here, double it in size by adding the 21 code changes into it and blending it with the 24s, as well as the New York State specific changes, things that go into Chapter 1, and any new, potentially new or existing statutes we need to blend into any of that. That'll bring us into September 2023 meeting with a final draft of the Notice of Rule and Development, where we'll be able to take any of the public comments, any comments we have from the June meeting, and try to blend it all into one, hopefully I'll call it a final draft NRD document to kind of kick off the rulemaking process. December, we'll hopefully have those comments back, and we'll be able to present those comments we received during the NRD. We're thinking to then, typically we have a March meeting, in the first quarter. We push that a little earlier into January and February of 2024. That'll allow us to get a final draft of the notice of proposed rulemaking documents done as soon as possible and in front of everybody, so we can get a vote or a conceptual approval, I guess we do at that point, to move forward with the official rulemaking process. And then between that January/February meeting and the June meeting would be the official public comment period. June 24, assessment of the comments and drafts brought in front of the co-council, and then between the June and September meeting, staff would address those comments, address co-council comments, and hopefully have a final NOA package ready for vote at the September 2024 meeting, which puts us into publishing the books with ICC and publishing an NOA September, December, and there's a 90-day effective date and some other things that have to kick into there, which would put us best case scenario into an early to mid 2025 effective date.
Okay, before I move it on, I'm going to note a couple of things. Obviously, we sent this to you last week at best, so I understand it's tough to look at. I also know that all of you have day jobs, as do I, and so reading this amount of material is difficult. I'm going to ask that as you move through it over the next couple of months before we meet again, if you have questions, kick them to Kevin, kick them to Emma, and staff will respond. Anything that's major, we're going to try and talk about at the next 2 to 3 meetings, right? June for sure, September for sure. At that point, we're probably moving towards an NRD. So we'll be then talking to you about public comments, but I'd like to get some of the major issues. So we'll start to highlight the major issues for you as well, just because I know this is a lot. Once it doubles and triples in size, it's going to get tough. This is a new process for everybody, including staff. We are literally moving in lockstep, which actually kind of brings me to the second point. And I know I make it a lot. I make it to every meeting, but I feel it's necessary to continue to make it. There are other factors here besides staff's ability to pound through this. We are, I thought we were a few months behind ICC. I think we're at this point a couple of days behind ICC. I mean, they are putting out the books, just a little ahead of us as they're ready. So that's, got some things out there that some challenges that we're going to have to sort of work through. And this is a good timeline. It's an aspirational timeline, and I hope we can stick to it as much as we can. But I just want to note that staff is absolutely doing the best they can with what they have in front of them day to day and at the minute. Okay, those are my 2 notes. Does anyone have questions on timeline for Kevin before we jump to Emma to start walking us through the energy code work that she's done over the last couple of months? Okay. Emma, you're up.
Thank you. And I'll have to warn you, though, that when Kevin and Matt talk about the volume of the document doubling or tripling, for the energy code in particular, what you have in front of you is a relatively short document. You can expect that document to grow tenfold. And as it's noted in the document, going to the next couple of meetings, you will see changes made to the state energy code as a result of the development process of the 2021 and the 2024 international energy conservation codes. You're going to see New York State specific amendments based on current and potential future statutory provisions, and you'll see also editorial modifications and proposed changes that we have received, the division has received after the publication of the 2020 codes. So that's all coming, but what's in front of you right now is language developed as a result of the revisions that were made to Article 11 of the Energy Law on July 5th of last year, and by Chapter 374 of the Laws of 2022, better known as the Advanced Building Codes Act. Kevin's going to walk you through a sample document in a few minutes, but as you have seen, the formatting is such that whatever text you see in black pretty much stays the same. Red with a cross strike through is language deleted, and blue underline is new language. Specific to the energy code document that you have in front of you, I'll point out to you that in this particular case, red crossed out language is not necessarily deleted and gone. To a great degree, that language is consolidated because of the revisions made with the energy law, took exceptions out of Chapter 1, and those are consolidated with the existing building provisions in Chapter 5, for example. So it's not exactly gone, it's consolidated. The opposite of that is also true. You're going to see some blue underlined language. That's not necessarily brand new language. That's language that's being relocated and consolidated. But by large, the only new language you will see that's not part of the current version of the Energy Code is language that pertains to historic building provisions, because that was one of the changes made by the Energy Law. So the language you see there was developed in consultation with the Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation. And with that, I'm going to let Kevin walk you through the formatting on how the document works, and I'll be here to answer any questions.
Okay, I'll I'll go over a little bit of the uniform code stuff quickly first, and then I'll jump into the example document. But for the uniform code, like I said before, the first task that we did was consolidating the 2024 ICC code change proposals. Those proposals took place over the last 2 years, and ICC is themselves currently developing those into the book. So we took the monographs and the code hearing videos and some other documents, and we're able to consolidate them. So basically what you have in front of you is just the changes. So the idea is if it's not in these packets that you've seen, it wasn't changed in the 2024 codes. Staff took a lot of energy and a lot of time to consolidate them also into their own books. If you're familiar with the ICC process, a lot of times a certain committee may hear hearings or hear proposals, but they actually hear proposals that span multiple books. And IFC chapters 9 and IBC chapters 9 align, and so there's a lot of work to go into blending these. So I will also say, as much as you have just received these Monday and obviously have time to digest what's in here, staff also has not fully digested what's in these documents. That's part of what's going to be happening over the next few months. And so, like Matt said, encouraging, the way we structured these, we put proposal numbers in front of each one. So if you have a particular topic or a particular proposal that you have a question on, or you have a statement to make, or you think is something that has to happen, referencing those proposal numbers, I think, is a good way for us to organize this moving forward. So the document that I guess I can walk through a little bit would be the property maintenance code document. And a good example of why this is a good document and is whether people have digested it all or not is right off the bat, the third proposal that's in here is a change to allow private swimming pools equipped with a power safety cover to be exempt from the enclosure requirement. So obviously, that's not a provision that we are going to be accepting in New York State based on agenda item number 3 today. The law that was just passed means this is not something statutory that New York State can even do. So again, these are strict ICC proposals. They still need to be analyzed. They still need to, determine how they impact New York State. We didn't do anything as far as cost goes, cost impacts, anything like that. There are, even within the property maintenance code, there are 3 or 4 New York State changes that we went to ICC, presented to ICC, and successfully got through. So hopefully I encourage the co-counsel to like those ones, because staff did work hard to get that changed at the ICC level. So, but again, it's structured where there's a proposal number. We tried to group like proposals together. Again, sometimes, 3 people will make a proposal on one code section, so we had to blend that into what that code section would actually look like today instead of 3 separate proposals. So again, even in the property maintenance code, there's one proposal that blended 3 or 4 different proposals into one section. So that's all I have for that.
Okay. Before I open it up for questions, I'm just going to note that the public is seeing the materials that you guys are getting at the same time you are. We're posting them online. We decided this as a group about 2 or 3 years ago that it was important to get the information out to the public as fast as possible, and it's especially true now under the new process that we're putting together here, because it means that the public is in a position to comment on what we're doing sooner. Basically, when we're ready to send out the notice of rule of development, they are in a position to comment because they've seen everything as we're working through it, and not just hearing it every 3 months from us. Okay.
So those are on the Building Standards and Codes website link, is it?
If you go to the events tab and you see the public notice for today's meeting, all the agenda item documents for today's meeting are posted on the website.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Anybody have questions for Kevin or Emma?
The chair?
Sounded like Keith. Keith?
Yes.
It is Keith.
It sounded like Keith. Responding to what Emma mentioned before about some of the sections are actually not being deleted, but just simply got relocated or absorbed by some of the chapters or sections. Is it possible, or maybe the staff already thought about adding a comment column to certain sections and just simply mention that to help us out?
So we also, if you look, there is a cover sheet with a table. There's a space that we're going to have on the side for additional columns that's certainly something we could consider putting in there, whether it's editorial or relocation, so that way it's more clear. There is also a subject where we could, within the subject, just to note, relocation of material rather than identifying it as new material.
Okay.
So short
That'd be
answer was
very
yes.
helpful. Yeah, thank you.
But if I could point to that cover sheet that is on page 3 of the Energy Code document, you can see the first column is a unique identifier for each change. The next one is the code section it pertains to. Then there's the title of the section, and lastly a subject. And there's a short comment that says remove, relocate, consolidate, add, and so forth. And so please, if you could take a look at that, let us know if that meets what you were looking for, or if it doesn't, then we appreciate the feedback.
I mean, it would be helpful to actually get to know where it is being relocated, because we're trying to piece together the whole picture. So any sort of additional information would be very helpful. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Keith. We can work on that, right?
Yep.
All right. Anyone else? Okay, I for the first time, I'm actually seeing the New York City on the screen. So I'm going to note that Mike Sabatino is here today. He's representing the mayor of Yonkers. Thanks for coming, Mike. It's good to see you again. Hope we see you again. All right. All right, that closes this agenda item. That's agenda item 7. Now moving to 8, public comment period. Kevin, I know you have a list of people online. Do we have anyone in the room as well?
We have at least 4 people in the room, I believe, that wanted to speak, and maybe 1 or 2 remote that would like to speak. So let me just start with the room.
Why don't we start with the room? Oh,
Do you want me?
you go ahead. Go ahead. Call them up.
Thank you. Michael Hernandez.
Why don't we have you come up to the lectern? It's probably easier for the council to see it. I'm sorry to the rooms, they're gonna kind of get the back of your head. It's no good place to put you.
Good morning,
Good morning,
members. Thank you for your service. My name is Michael Hernandez. I'm New York State Policy Director for Rewiring America. I just wanted to talk to you today about buildings. The building sector is the #1 source of greenhouse gas pollution in New York State. So there's really, New York State is moving dedicatedly to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. We passed in 2019 the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act. Section 7.2 of that law provided that all agencies, including commissions of the Department of State, are required to consider carbon reduction goals when taking official action for the state. The carbon reduction goals are 40% carbon reduction by 2030 and 85% carbon reduction by 2050. So these are ambitious goals, and being that the building sector is the #1 source of greenhouse gas emissions, this is within your purview. And so when making your update to the 2024 building code, we implore you to consider, especially with new construction and existing construction, the electrification and the prohibition of fossil fuel combustion systems within those buildings. So there is a law that requires that, like I said, that was the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act. In addition to that, there's the Advanced Building Code that was passed in July of 2022, which specifically targeted the Building Code Council and said, Building Code Council, when you're promulgating regulations, considering updates to the building code, you must include, to the maximum extent feasible, the recommendations of the Climate Action Council. The Climate Action Council's recommendations came out in December of 2022, and specifically said, Building Code Council, for new construction in New York State, you should have a prohibition on fossil fuel combustion systems starting in January of 2025. And so that is in alignment with the timeline for your 2024 building code update. And we would implore you to make sure that when you are doing the 2024 building code update, that you consider these carbon reduction goals, the recommendations of the Climate Action Council, as required by law. Each of you, as members of this council, have taken an oath to uphold the laws of the state of New York. And so, there's two laws that are saying, Building Code Council, you must consider the carbon reduction goals that have been set out in law and put them into the building code. So we ask that as you're going through this process, as was laid out, that you make this provision, these carbon reduction goals, a transparent part of the process that the public can be a part of and can see your feasibility analysis that you're taking pursuant to the advanced building code law. So we thank you again for your time and for your service, and please just implore you to consider those carbon reduction goals. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. If members have comment, because I can see Claudia looking at me, we will do it during other business in 10. For now, we want to hear from the public. So let me stop the timer. I was remiss, I should tell the people commenting that we have a 3 to 5 minutes, we'll say 5 minutes limit, and that's because we have a lot of people on the list today and we want to hear from everybody. I'm also going to note, I was remiss, I should have started with, you should have received it yesterday, I believe. Yes, a letter from the American Wood Council. Matt Hunter sent it to us. I don't know if he's going to speak today, but I just want to note that is in your packet from yesterday. Okay, number 2.
So I guess also in the room we have Luke Michaels.
Luke, if you want to come up and take the lecture.
Thank you, Council, for having me today. So my name is Luke Michaels. I'm a home builder in the Capital Region. The company's name is Michaels Group Homes. And also wanted to discuss or talk about the proposed legislation to incorporate all electric homes in New York State. I think 2 factors need to be considered: affordability and reliability. The state has goals to remove the natural gas hookups for new home construction in an effort to reach a cleaner environment. We can all agree that we need a cleaner environment. However, right now is not the time for this change. The state's not ready to solely rely on electricity. The electric grid is not capable of handling the increased demands of all electric buildings, which causes reliability issues. So to mandate all homes be electric by code could lead to some dangerous scenarios. In some remote areas of the state, the electric grid may not be as sophisticated as some other metro areas. And if we saw storms like we saw earlier this year, there could be some many long days without power. Backup battery packs and solar panels can help alleviate some of the concerns in the case of prolonged power outage. However, these provisions are extremely costly, and to an end user, could be as much as $25,000 to $40,000 per home to have a reliable heating source. So on the affordability side, by going all electric and specifically removing the natural gas option, new home buyers aren't going to have the choice on how to heat their homes. In any purchasing or economic environment, by removing a customer's choice, the result is increased costs. Currently, for new home offerings, a builder can offer a multitude of different ways to heat a home. And the most cost-effective and most opted for is natural gas. So if we're mandated to use all electric in new construction, our new home prices go up due to our new fixed costs of using all electric. New construction will not be able to offer the reliability of natural gas or the affordability and convenience of gas furnaces, gas hot water heaters, gas fireplaces, gas stoves, or gas appliances. So in my business, my biggest competition in new home building is the resale market. I will now have a more expensive product comparatively and less heating and appliance options to offer my new customers than a resale home can offer where they're already hooked up to the natural gas infrastructure. So therefore, the demand of existing homes will skyrocket because they can offer all these conveniences and reliability of natural gas. And this will drive up the price of resale homes and further the housing affordability crisis that the state and governor also have goals to fix in the future. Currently, there's rebates and programs for existing housing stock to be brought up to energy efficiency standards with insulation upgrades, energy efficient appliances, new doors, new windows. There's dollars on the tables for existing homes to meet the new energy codes and keep up with what new construction is currently supplying. Interestingly enough, there are even rebates in place now for existing homes to become more efficient and environmentally friendly by hooking up to natural gas. However, under the proposed electrification, there's no programs for new construction for rebates or anything to help with the cost of adding all electric. So in the capital region where I build, in 2021 there were 2,642 new building permits. In the same region, there's over 600,000 existing natural gas users. When looking at the entire housing market in my area, new construction makes up a very small portion of the homes using natural gas to heat their homes. To target new construction as the culprit of the climate issues in our state, and the world for that matter, it's an oversight, it's an overreach, and it has serious consequences on the affordability and reliability of new homes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Michaels. Next up,
Peter Belmonte.
Belmonte, if you'd like to come up.
I'm Pete Belmonte, with Belmonte Builders, representing the Capital Region Builders and Remodelers Association. The term of cost quite often is used without any support on what it really means. We have been a home building company in the Capital Region of New York for the last 40 years. We have prided ourselves in being very progressive in what we do. We were one of the first builders in the Capital Region to implement LEED construction, and we have been a very frequent implementer of geothermal and air source heat pump as a source of heating. So I feel that we have a very good basis and understanding of what the cost of implementing the change that the governor is prescribing for the state. I'm a strong believer that the state needs to change, along with the rest of the country, needs to change its habits on uses of fuels. We have to start moving to a cleaner society. But we need to do it in a safe and a practical way, one that people can both afford and they can enjoy. Right now, at the pace that New York State is trying to implement this change, I think they're implementing a very dangerous program. When it comes to cost, we have 3 homes right now implementing a air source heat pump as an alternative energy of fuel. Each one of those homes have increased their cost of purchase somewhere between $25,000 and $35,000. I think you need to apply that to yourself. All of us have a budget that we have to live in. We all enjoy the better things in life. We all have families that we're trying to provide a safe environment for. Could you go out today and purchase a home, independent of what your budget may be, and carelessly spend an additional $25,000 or $30,000? I agree with the program. I think fossil fuels need to become an element of the past, and we need to start relying on newer technologies. But we need to do it at a reasonable pace. One of the alternatives that has been presented to the state is that we start off with air source heat pumps as the primary source of heat, but we give ourselves the opportunity to rely on natural gas as the fail-safe. Fail-safe being air source heat pumps start to lose their effectiveness at approximately 5 to 10 degrees Fahrenheit. Once you get below that, unfortunately, in the lower part of New York State, that's not frequent, but in the area that we live in going north, it is very frequent for us to experience temperatures in that range. To go to 100% electric backup at that point in time is going to be astronomical in cost from a use standpoint. That's why we stopped using heat pumps and electric heat back in the 80s and started driving the gas expansion. My best prescription for New York State is to do a multi-step program. Start off in 2025 as they planned, going to an air source heat pump as your primary source of heat, but give the opportunity to go to a gas backup. As National Grid builds the grid, gets better utilization of their resources, being able to reduce energy costs, we then start making a conversion and allow one of the more progressive fuels that will be coming out in the future, potentially being all electric or potentially forms of hydrogen or green gases, utilize them as they become more available. But to rush this change through in 2025, I personally feel that New York State is making a very bad move. They're going to deteriorate the new home construction process, which is derogatory to the governor's goal of expanding homes for people that can't afford homes. We're taking affordability into a totally new stratosphere by adding $25,000 to $35,000 per home, and we have a reliability issue, which National Grid has publicly said their grid is not ready to support the change that this is going to take place. If you'd like to have any more details on the actual cost, I'll be more than glad to share them with you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Lindsay Belmonte.
Good afternoon. Lindsay Belmonte with Belmonte Builders. I'm a representative of the Capital Region Builders and Remodelers Association, as well as a representative of the New York State Builders Association. I very much agree with what Peter and Michael have already spoke upon. I also agree that what New York State is trying to do is a good idea, obviously. But I would like to speak specifically on the younger generation. My friends can't afford new homes. If you don't have two spouses with really good incomes, you can't afford a new home. So they're having to purchase existing homes, which obviously the stock of existing homes is slim. With purchasing an existing home, if New York State implements these changes, they also have to consider changing the entire system in the home. That adds a cost to buying an existing home. So all said and done, they're gonna have to stay with the home that they're living in, the rental property that they're living in, and it's just gonna become a domino effect. It's almost like New York State's trying to prevent new construction. We also have new neighborhoods that we're opening, that we're installing gas in. What's gonna happen in 3 years from now? Are we not gonna be able to utilize the gas that's in place? Are we gonna have to spend more money to shut the gas off? It's a whole multitude of things. I think that pretty much covers everything. I appreciate you listening to me.
Thank you for your comments. Kevin, do we have anybody else in the room?
Nobody else that had signed up in this room. I know there's some individuals, I know Matt, you had already acknowledged Matt Hunter's letter from New York City. Is there anyone else in the New York City office that has a public comment?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
Mr. Basil.
My name is Mike Fazio. I'm the Executive Director of the New York State Builders Association. We're a statewide trade group that employs thousands of men and women in the residential construction industry. I'd like to thank you for allowing me the time to speak here today. I'd like to note that New York State Builders is NYSBA is the acronym for that. NYSBA supports decarbonization and a thoughtful and practical approach to transitioning to all electric, and the technological progress that'll come with transitioning to all electric. But our concerns are, as a few previously stated, the reliability of the grid and the dependability of the grid. We feel we need assurances that New York State can meet the power demands in the near future and beyond. we need to have an efficient power supply for our citizens. And I've even heard in person, NYSERDA has said there's a possibility in the future for rolling blackouts as we implement this plan. The last 2 to 3 years, the housing industry around in the nation and across the state, we've experienced doubling of mortgage interest rates, cost of inflation, supply chain issues, material price increases that come along with that, and now a gas ban. A lot of these expenses are passed on to the new home buyer, as you might know. And our concerns regarding code changes that may be coming along with this in new construction. Our fear, obviously, is that these mandates will make new housing more expensive and less affordable for young families, young professionals, middle-class folks, lower income people trying to achieve a first-time home and trying to gain some equity and generational wealth is also a concern. Another important issue is the fear that New York State, moving forward, won't be able to compete with our neighboring states. Pennsylvania, Connecticut, and New Jersey, who don't have these mandates. So, in addition to losing people to southern states, we're concerned about losing residents to our neighboring states. And as you all know, the governor wants to create 800,000 new units in the next 10 years. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Mayor Adams in the city I'm sitting in wants to add 500,000 units in the next 10 years of new housing as well. As many of you are aware, we have a severe housing deficit in the country and in New York State. We need to grow the population. We need to stem people leaving. We need to support the economy of New York. So we also know that with these mandates come increased utility costs for consumers and ratepayers, and will create a disincentive for new construction. And also aggressively pursuing these mandates on the building code run contrary to the governor's housing objectives. So I would urge the council to keep these things in mind. And we already in New York State build some of the most energy efficient homes in the country. And any policies that negatively affect the residential construction industry, they hurt every citizen in the state and they hurt the economy of New York State. So again, we need to ensure the grid can handle the increased demand before mandating full electrification. And I respectfully ask the Code Council to take into consideration the severe housing deficit in the state and the effects these costs will have on housing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Fazio. Anyone else in New York City that would like to address the council?
Yes.
To just begin this, or hold this out here.
Thank you.
Perfect. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the Building Council. I always get asked to speak right before lunch, so I'll leave my comments very, very brief. You should have received my letter. I couldn't agree more with the first speaker who was talking about embodied carbon and embodied energy. We have some tools at our disposal if New York State adopts the 2021 and later IBCs with regard to using low embodied carbon materials like wood. The American Wood Council is the technical experts on the building code for wood. We write the provisions for design and construction and testing for wood materials. And we stand ready to assist you with any technical questions about the newer tall mass timber provisions that are in the 2021 IBC. It's definitely a lower carbon solution. Wood sequesters, carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. And with my colleagues' comments over here about 800,000 units and 500,000 units in New York State and New York City, it would be a tremendous opportunity to comply with those climate, greenhouse gas reduction goals by using lower embodied carbon materials like wood. So thank you for your time, and thank you for consideration of my letter.
Thank you, Mr. Hunt. Kevin, who do you have online?
Okay, so at the moment, I have 3 individuals online: Mary Thompson, Jeffrey Shapiro, and Elizabeth, who would like to address the council. And so I guess I'll just pause there and say, if I didn't say your name and you are online, please type into me now, and we'll go right down the list, starting with Mary Thompson. I'm going to unmute you. You should be unmuted.
Hi, thank you. Good afternoon. I have to say ditto to a number of the speakers. My name is Mary Thompson. I'm with the Home Builders and Remodelers of Central New York, and many of my colleagues have already said what they have to say. I think and I hope that you Building Code Council members understand the unintended consequences that are going to happen if we move too quickly with the electrification. I was very surprised to hear in one of the Senate Council hearings that in New York State still buy a good amount of our electricity from Pennsylvania, which uses coal to help produce it. So those kind of things need to be cleaned up and straightened up, and the utilities need to have the time to do that, as well as making the grid more reliable. As many people have said, new home construction is already very tight. It's already built with a lot of energy efficiency. If we're going to concentrate on anything, let's concentrate on these existing homes that 30, 50 years ago weren't built with insulation, because that was the code at the time. Nobody did anything wrong. That was just the code at the time. So this needs to be thought through more thoroughly. Unfortunately, in talking to some of the officials, they don't understand the building science well enough, I guess, to really understand this. So we're looking to the Code Council members to help us. So we appreciate all of the work that you do and will continue to do, and reach out to us for any questions that you might have. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Kevin?
Next, we have Jeffrey Shapiro. I'm going to unmute you now. You should be unmuted.
Good afternoon. I'm Jeff Shapiro. I'm a licensed fire protection engineer and executive director of the IRC Fire Sprinkler Coalition, and an active participant in the ICC code development process. I'd like to offer 3 brief comments. First, I am the proponent of a proposal to consider fully adopting the IRC requirements for fire sprinklers in townhouses, not in 1 and 2 family, but only in townhouses, which has now been in the international codes for 6 editions. And I would like to advance that in New York to adopt the code unamended on townhouse fire sprinklers. 13 states now adopt requirements for fire sprinklers in townhouses, including a number of your neighboring states. And after recently working with the state of Washington to achieve adoption of a proposal that was actually supported by both the building industry and code officials, I'm looking forward to discussing the topic during the New York code development process that's upcoming. And I'm hopeful that perhaps a task group might be formed to explore this specific topic. My other comments are procedural. Second, there is apparently no process for receiving acknowledgement of a proposal submittal or being automatically notified of upcoming Code Council meetings. So I'm asking, I know the staff is busy, but if possible, it would be helpful for participants to receive an acknowledgement of proposal emails and to receive some notification to be a participant in the upcoming Code Council meetings. And in that regard, my third point, it would be helpful to add some link to events on the DOS website on the code development page. As a member of the public, I went looking on the code development page for information about upcoming meetings and ultimately wasn't able to find anything. I do know that the meeting announcement was posted under events, but it was a pretty cryptic way of navigating it through the site, which I eventually did after Dr. Google found it for me when I typed in a few keywords. But if it's possible to add a link to upcoming events on the DOS website on the code development page, I think that would be helpful to me and other people who would like to participate in the process that are not currently directly notified. Thank you for the opportunity to offer these comments.
Thank you, Mr. Shapiro. Okay, and then lastly, just find Elizabeth in the list. Okay, Elizabeth, you should be unmuted.
Thank you, and thank you so much for the opportunity to speak. My name is Liz Moran. I'm the New York policy advocate with Earth Justice. Earth Justice is a national nonprofit environmental law organization. We represent clients across the country to address issues from climate, water quality protections, and more. I want to speak today in support of a mandate for all electric new construction in New York State. Ideally to begin no later than January 1st, 2025. I'll start by saying one of the largest cities in the country and the world is already moving forward with this. Starting this coming year, New York City will have all-electric new construction for buildings 6 stories and under, and in 2027, 7 stories and larger. We know the technology is ready and available, and this is already happening. But even though there's a mandate in New York City, that doesn't mean we aren't already seeing all-electric new construction taking place elsewhere across the state, regardless of climate region. So these buildings are already coming online, and it makes total sense because there are a number of studies that found all-electric new construction is cheaper for New Yorkers. These are more affordable buildings both to construct and for people's utility bills. So it makes sense for New York State to be going in this direction. I want to address a couple of the points I heard in the time I've been on here regarding the grid and the kind of power New York gets to the grid. We have a pretty green grid in New York. A lot of our power does come from upstate, and it's hydro, nuclear, and other renewable energy sources. There is very little power that the state is getting from out of state. Of course, we need more renewables to come online, make improvements to our grid resiliency. There's no question of this. But new construction that is all electric is not going to put those things in jeopardy. We build buildings now, they all require electricity as it is. So we should have new buildings in New York State that are relying upon air source heat pumps, which the technology is proven to work even in the coldest climates of the state, and geothermal units. So we encourage the council to support policies that would promote all electric new construction and the electrification of buildings. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Kevin, is there anybody else? I do not see anyone else who has chimed in. Okay. I will close public comment, move us to agenda item 9, and announce that in 2023 we have meetings currently scheduled for June 23rd, September 22nd, and December 1. Please check your calendars. It's probably a good idea that we have as many people in the room as possible as we move through that process. Also, I would probably note that we took about 2 hours today. I have a feeling that the June and September meetings especially may go longer than that. We'll see how it sets up. If there's nothing else there, and there shouldn't be, we'll move to agenda item 10. Is there any other business to come before us today? It includes if members wish to speak or make any statements.
Mr. Chairman?
Tim.
Just to follow up on a couple items from prior
council discussions and deliberations. I have not had the opportunity to go through the whole pile of stuff, really.
Can't believe it.
But I want to make sure that we do address the number of items that were from the November work group, November of 2021, specifically regarding the emergency responder radio coverage in existing buildings, mobile fueling, the 30-foot versus 55-foot sprinkler height requirements, townhouse sprinklers, and then the second item that was discussed briefly at a prior meeting was to help design professionals and others understand, especially code officials, to move towards having a system or a commentary that the public has access to code proposals and code justifications to get a background of why specific changes occurred in New York. So those would be two items I think I would like to make sure that we do follow up on as we've discussed before.
Thanks, Tim. I got down everything, but I'll catch up with you afterwards.
Thank you.
Okay. Buddy.
Thank you. I'll be brief. I know we had a lot of comments today about the CLCPA and the building construction code, as well as the energy code. I believe it impacts, and I haven't had a chance to look through everything that we got earlier this week, but the energy code in particular is pretty scant as it stands right now. I know Emma kind of covered it briefly, but I'm assuming that some of these changes are going to be, added in, making this document multi-fold increases. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that was to Emma's point where she said, jokingly, this is going to triple. Her document's going to be substantially larger in the coming months.
Because I know people are mentioning about the banning of natural gas hookups, but it's my understanding that that bill has not yet been passed. It's in the budget negotiations at this point, right? Okay, but there are other provisions that have already passed that we are mandated to look at and to be incorporating into this next revision, and I'm not seeing that yet, just in what I've scanned through so far. So, okay, that's good to know. I did also want to just briefly, I picked up on the proposal about the sprinklers in the townhomes. Is that included? Has that been included in?
It has not been yet. I guess, like Jeff said, it's in the baseline ICC documents. It's typically something that New York State has modified, but
So it will not be in there.
it's not in these changes because it's not something.
It's already an existing change that we do not adopt.
From understanding, these are just the changes currently from the 2021 to the 2024 ICC.
Right.
We will be looking at the changes from the 2018 to the 2021 as well.
Correct.
But those may not include any provisions that have been in the code for some time that New York just automatically amended.
Right, and that's also part of the next phase is to start to blend in New York State specific statutory requirements, and then, I guess the discussion on typical New York State changes that have been made in the past.
So if there is something in the code that hasn't been changed from the ICC in 2021 and 2024, that can still be open for discussion. That's correct, brought up in this code section.
Of course. Okay. Anyone else? Okay. Well, that concludes our business before the council today. So I will, unless there's an objection, I'll make a motion to adjourn. That motion's now seconded by Sean. All in favor? Aye. Okay, there is no more business to come before the council. We have adjourned. I'm going to, before I take us off the record, I'm just going to note that two people jumped in there after we closed public comment wishing to speak. I'm going to invite them to speak at the next meeting because we've already moved their agenda. All right, the record is closed. Thank you all.